Oh, thank you for recording. I was forgetting again. Um, so today I'm going to talk about a little bit of statistical analysis plan, specifically for psychometric papers, but also talking about why it's important to have a statistical analysis plan and how to build it, how to write it, and why we will expect you to do that if you're an analyst or if you're working with an analyst into the Gemini group, because it's very useful to have a statistical analysis plan or an SAP. So I'm going to use the audit multi-groups statistical analysis plan. So it's a paper that I'm working with within the psychometric session, that it's going to be about using a lot of data sets that we've collected audit uh, in Tanzania before. So before diving into it, I just want to say that you can interrupt me anytime to ask questions, to add some comments, to share jokes. It's fine, whatever you want to do. This is a shared learning space and it's a safe space. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit more a writing section, because I'm going to write with you guys how to the basics of a statistical analysis plan and why we should do it and what it means for a analyst like myself. So for those who are not familiar with a statistical analysis plan, this is a document where we put every single thing that we're going to do regarding the statistical methods or the methodology itself. So it's a very comprehensive document that's going to encompass a lot of information regarding the paper and its methodology, its statistics, and you can do it for any type of paper. You must do it for any type of paper. And the important thing about doing a statistical analysis plan is that it allows us a better understanding between those that are writing and those that are doing the analysis. Because sometimes it's not the same person. Most of the time, it's not the same person. And there can be some miscommunication in between, since most of the time, people that are doing the analysis are not focusing on writing, and people that are writing are not likely to understand in deep the analysis. It's not like you need to understand analysis, because you have analysts for that. But it's useful to have a standard procedure to help you understand what's the paper about, what's their objective, what's the methods that we're going to apply, what's the approach that we're going to take. So it facilitates and makes it easier for us that are used to do analysis to put everything we want for you to have regarding the methodology and analysis itself into a document. So you don't need to keep asking the analyst, what is this? What is that? Yada, yada. So the statistical analysis plan is very useful for that purpose, but also for us to keep papers moving, because sometimes it's hard to rely on someone else to check it every single time, to do meetings, to do uh, constant meetings to talk about this. So a statistical analysis plan is going to be useful for us to create this collaborative methodology without needing too much meetings and efforts. So we can share this with anyone that's involved in the paper, and we're going to start building this together, and we can put some comments and say, this is not clear enough, or I don't understand what is this for, or this is a paper that uses the same methodology, so that's one that we're going to use as a parameter or a background for this analysis. So it's very useful when we're trying to create these collaborative papers that we don't want to spend hours and hours into meetings, because sometimes these statistics plans can take a long time. So it's useful when you have the statistical analysis plan for you to have a standard and a overview of everything you're going to do, and anyone can contribute. So this is a basic structure of the statistical analysis plan, the SAP. And again, it's something that we want to do for every paper that we're going to do in the group, in the Gemini group. And it can be seen sometimes as a waste of time. But again, it's not a waste of time because it allows us to have a standard procedure and make it easier for us to understand what we're doing and to make sure there's no miscommunication, there's no noise into those that are doing the paper, especially the statistician or the analyst itself, themselves. So this is a very basic structure, and I use this one because it was a standard one that we have used for a little bit now, and I changed it a little bit to be specifically for psychometric papers. That's the section that I'm more interested in. So I kept a little sections that is not useful for us. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we're going to going into the statistical analysis plan itself. But the statistical analysis plan can be standardized, but it's also important to it be singular to each project. So it needs to relate to the project, to the objective, to the backgrounds, but it needs to have the same sections if you're doing a similar statistical analysis. So if I'm doing a GIS approach, there's a bunch of GIS approaches. But if I'm doing a space-time cube, and I already have a statistical analysis plan for a space-time cube, it's useful to use the same one because they're probably going to have the same sections that I will need to disclaim in a space-time cube. The same goes for a machine learning approach, where I'm going to create a machine learning and do some accuracy reporting, and it's going to be useful to have the statistical analysis plan standardized. So every time that I'm going to use a machine learning approach to test for accuracy for a model, I don't need to redo everything by scratch. I can just take this one that I already have and change it a little bit to be more related to this new paper, to this new objective. So it's more like a overview. It's more like a common knowledge of that specific theme that will adapt for more specific or non-specific statistical analysis. So what you must have in every single one is an introduction. And this is something that it's very, very useful for analysts, and not just useful, but it's mandatory. Because if you don't have, as an analyst, a clear objective, then you don't know what approach you have. You don't know what step to take. Because as everything goes toward the objective, and I'm going to quote João Viçosi here, saying that the most important thing that needs to be clear in everyone's mind when we're talking about a paper or a project or a research is a research question, and then the hypothesis and the objectives, because that's what's going to lead us to an introduction, to a method, to the results, to the discussion, and to the conclusion itself. So we must be clear on the objectives, on the aims, on the research question. So this introduction is very important. So we get everything aligned. So the analysts and the writers, the research, the PIs, they are all aligned within the same goal, with the same objective. So for instance, you must write some background. Yes, thank you actually for reminding that you can show captions. If I'm talking too fast, please let me know and I can slow down a little bit. Okay, so it's important for us to have a background. It doesn't need to be long in the statistical analysis plan. You can have a shorter background. So for instance, the audit multi-groups. So it's a paper that is related to how audit was collected in a lot of people, but sometimes when we're measuring things, and this is something more related to validation tools, measurement and stuff, it is different on how different groups will read and assess certain latent variables. For instance, if we're talking about violence and a perception of violence, someone that is a man will have a different look on what's violence and how it's perceived and everything like that. And it's going to be different from what a woman sees violence is. The same goes for age. So an adult will have a different vision of what violence is than a teenager, a child, a older adult. So this is gonna be this can lead to a variation into the answers. So if I'm reading something and can be interpreted in multiple ways depending on what I am reading, then it's probably not a good measure. So this is what the basic measurement thing is. We need to have a measurement that's going to be invariable. Invariable is a word exists? I don't know. Won't variate along groups. So men and women will have the same answers. Non-binary people, Black people, white people, adults, teenagers, childs. It doesn't matter which group I'm assessing, they're all gonna have likely the same answers because they're reading the same questions and the question is measuring the same thing. So this is something that I want to write in the background. So the background here, it can be short. It can be like a paragraph. It can be more. It can be a little bit more, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs, depending on how do you want to approach it or how do you want to write it. But you can have it as short as you want, or as one paragraph, for example. So this is something that we must say what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to write something very simple, so it will not be as refined as it can be, but it's just for the sake of observation and the sake of knowledge. So the background here is measurement tools. I don't know how to write. Yeah. Measurement tools needs to assess behaviors and traits. Why is it? Okay, I put it in a AU. And traits within diverse populations. So this is where I'm gonna put it. It can then doesn't need to be like right now when I'm writing this and I'm not looking to literature or anything like that. It doesn't need to be something very huge or difficult to write. You're just gonna put whatever you want to talk about and what led to the objective. So it's easier for someone that's going to look at it and see if it's what you're going to talk about, what's going to be the main issue, the problem that you're going to talk about. So a measurement tool need to be to assess behaviors and traits within device populations, and there must be variant within its answers, because I cannot expect different measures for women and men, non-binary people, adults, teenagers, and all in between. So this is where I'm going to build this background. So the authors have collected the alcohol use disorder. Now I don't know what audit means. Identification test.
Identification test.
Yeah.
You can see that some of us have memorized that over time.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, I said you could tell that some of us have memorized that quite well over time.
Yeah. So the alcohol use disorder identification test in multiple groups in Tanzania. But they have never been assessed for invariation regarding the answers. So the background here, very simply, just reading the top of my head and very poorly written, is just to explain why I'm doing this paper. So measurement tools need to be assessed behaviors and traits within the various populations, and they must be invariant. The authors have collected audits in multiple groups in Tanzania, but they never have been assessed for invariation regarding the answers. What that mean? I didn't test it if groups perceived and answered audit differently. So the objective here is to identify it's to analyze invariation, variant characteristics of audit within multiple groups in Tanzania. So this is a background that it's going to be useful, and I'm doing the analysis here, I'm not doing the writing. So this can definitely use some writing knowledge and writing help here. So I'm going to be using more of my time doing what I really need to do. It's the data management, statistical methods, and the background is more likely the writers and the PIs are going to be writing this, so they can be clear on what they're going to do. But the objective here is to analyze the invariant characteristic of audit within multiple groups in Tanzania. So I want to know if yeah, reliability.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think that's the English word we're looking for. If anybody disagrees, let me know.
Yeah, the reliability is probably the word, yeah, but we also use a lot of because it's the property of being invariant. It's invariant. Yeah. So I've seen that a couple times in psychometric papers, so but reliability is going to be a good one. So this part is going to be just introduction, just what I want to do. Then I'm going to go with the study design before I even go for the instrument description. Because that's what I'm gonna approach. How I'm gonna approach this. So here I'll have a cross-sectional design with psychometric evaluation using Python response theory. So this is a cross-sectional response theory. I'm gonna just put this for the sake of time, but you're just gonna put the study design. Of course, you can write a little bit more here, but it's just for you to understand what type of design you're gonna use. Is it cross-sectional? Is a psychometric study? Is it GIS? Is it gonna be ecological with multiple group comparison? Is it gonna be longitudinal? Is it a cohort? Is a RCT? So it can help us to understand what the design is. Yes, Jean-Victor.
Yes, as you can probably notice, the SAP and the items that Nathan is describing is really similar to the actual paper or the methodology for the paper.
Yes.
They can actually, the SAP can feed into your paper. So if you can go as clear and as descriptive as you can, whenever you're going to write the paper, you're not going to lose time doing the work all over again. It's going to be there. So Nathan showing like this short and this glance of what it should be, but you could pretty much copy and paste the study design to your paper when you're writing. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I'm doing this like just this glance and short thing for the sake of time because we don't have much time to go. Because this we could use like 3 or 4 sessions to really write a proper statistical analysis plan. So this is where I'm putting the ideas, and then after the meeting is over, I'm gonna probably work on this for a couple days more, so it gets more what I want to do, what I'm gonna do for this paper. So this is just, I'm putting here the ideas, so that's why I use something that I didn't have a SAP ready and done. So I'm writing the draft with you so you to understand what's gonna lead me into any sections, into any ideas. But then after this, I'm gonna probably write way more here. So the study design will encompass the study design. So what you're gonna do in regarding the methodology. So it's cross-sectional, it's psychometric, it's GIS, it's machine learning, but it's longitudinal, it's ecological, it's RIT, RCT, and you can write a little bit more here. For psychometrics, before you even go further into analysis or any other parts of methodology, you need to describe the instrument you're gonna use. So here there are 3 things that I like to put into psychometric papers. First of all, the instrument overview. So I'm gonna describe what's the instrument about. So audit is a tool designed to measure OD and has been validated for multiple languages. It has been validated in Swahili, prior to the study. And then I'm gonna put the reference here. And this is one I know because it was João that validated audit in Tanzania, in Swahili. And he did that for TBI and for a community approach. So we have this in Swahili for more likely for the community and for population itself. So we can use that for population. And I can say that audit has, is it 10 questions? It's 8 questions, 10 questions, right?
Then, yeah.
10 questions with a cutoff limit of, no, with, is it for, what's the maximum score that you can have?
I think it's 0 to 40, right?
Is it 40?
Mhm.
That's correct.
That's correct. 40 score and a cutoff, no se escrever, cutoff score of 8 for AUD. So audit is designed to measure AUD, has been validated for multiple languages, Swahili as well. It has 10 questions with a 0 to 40 score and a cutoff score of 8 for AUD. So if someone have a score of 8, it's probably a sign of AUD. We cannot say it's AUD because it requires a physician to state there is AUD. But this is something that can be debatable. I can also use sometimes if I'm doing like a new approach, if I'm gonna do here a translation, a validation, I can put here what the methods that the person who first who created the instrument did for reliability. So for audit, let me say it was a 3-factor. I don't know, I'm just gonna put some gibberish here. So WHO use a 3 factors approach to assess reliability and validity for audit when considering the Swahili version, the associate all use a 2 factors approach. I don't know any of this. I'm just inventing. But it's just for you to understand that here, if I'm doing a psychometrics, I can put what did they use. And this is important for psychometrics because sometimes we're gonna have measurements that for one language, 3 factors is the most useful, but for the other one is the 2 factors, and for the other ones is a 4 factors. Because again, this is a measurement things that goes within the population, within the cultural background, within the characteristics of that population that I'm assessing. So reliability and validity needs to be very clear of what they did and what we're going to do. So this is something that we want to write in a psychometrics paper. And here I can say that I use how can I say this? Back-to-back translation? I think it's, yeah. So we used back-to-back translation to assess content validity. So this is an idea of what you're gonna need in a psychometrics paper for the instrument description. Then I'm gonna jump for the study population and go for the target population and any inclusion, exclusion criteria, any selection criteria. And I'm gonna put as well power and sample size. So not only I'm gonna define what's the population I'm gonna use, but also I'm gonna approach, but also how I'm gonna calculate the sample that I'm gonna need. So for this particular paper, the population is Tanzanian people that did audit screening for any of the previous studies within the, I think it's not only the PRACT, but I'm gonna just say the PRACT study, the registry study. So we are gonna use, because it's not. Yep.
It's fine, don't worry.
Yeah, I'm still learning. Sorry, guys, I had some headache this morning and I'm still thinking a little really slowly. I just said it and I completely forgot. My memory is terrible. Is it COVID?
You were saying that we're going to use data from PRACT study. I guess you can describe the studies where the data came from, which is like the PRACT study,
Yes.
the registry, etc.
If
But
you
I
have
guess you
the
also
protocols.
should mention like so for all of these three studies, I mean, at least for the last two, they were patients that were admitted to the well, there are multiple samples you're gonna use, right?
Yeah,
So
so it's a
I would
multiple
even
sample. Yeah.
I would even go to like, okay, the PRACT study collected so recruited patients that came to the emergency department after an acute injury. You know, and then if you're gonna use the PRACT community sample, and then you're gonna mention, oh, these patients were
Yes.
randomly sampled for all of that, because the different populations there were sampled differently as well.
Yeah. So here I'm gonna have this, what John was just saying, that since I'm gonna use previous data on how they collected in multiple research projects, I need to describe which projects and which criteria, selection criteria they had. But if I'm doing something new, for example, if I'm using a scorpion stings work that is not related to psychometrics at all, and I'm gonna use is for secondary data from Brazil. So the population here is the notifications of scorpion stings. And we used scorpion stings notifications made in unified health system facilities in Brazil. So, and what does it mean? So which selection criteria? So it needs to be every single scorpion sting that is confirmed, not only those that are suspected and then didn't, it wasn't a really scorpion. Sometimes that happens. Or that it needs to be only in adults, or it needs to be only those that lived within 2 hours from the facility, or those that didn't leave within 2 hours into the facility. So I'm going to describe this really, really well. So what are the population I'm going to target for this study? And then I'm going to use a sample size calculation and power. So if I'm going to use secondary data, I won't actually do a calculation because I'm using secondary data. Unless, of course, I'm using a different approach of design, study design. But in this case, the sample design, the sample size, and the power will be. There is now going to be a sample size that I need to describe the calculation. If I'm doing this and putting, okay, this one had 3,000 people, and this one had 400, and this one had 700, then it's going to be enough for me to know what the sample size is. And I can merge those two things if it's easier in this time. But if I'm not using a secondary data, like I'm using in this, I can put here that I'm going to calculate the sample size based on previous literature or a pilot study, which I don't recommend you to use it because it's not the best approach and something that you must do. We must never do. Or I'm using a well-documented sample size calculation, or this is a novel approach for the sample size, or I'm going to use a convenience sample. So I'm not going to calculate any sample. I'm just going to stick with everyone that I can find. So you don't need to really explain the calculation. You just need to state what you're going to do for a sample size. If you're going to calculate something, if you're just going to approach people and see what you get, or if you're using secondary data that contains a certain number of people. So for this one, I'm not going to put here. And then we're going to use the variables and define, and this is probably one of the things that we're going to be the most clear about. Because if I don't have a clear view of what my outcome is and what I want to use as a predictor, as a covariate, as a derivative variable, then the whole study will go into the bin. So the outcome variable here is going to be something more related to the response to the items into audit. So for this study, we are going to assess the response for the items of audit for each patient. So since we're doing a multi-group item response theory one, my outcome is the response for that items. So I know it's a little bit weird, but that's how it is. And for the predictors, what I'm going to use is that I want this to be a multi-group analysis. And I'm going to test these responses for multiple groups such as sex, tribe, age, condition, previous use of alcohol, anything like that I want to use, especially those socio-demographic characteristics. So for instance, we used as predictors as multi-group variables Sociodemographic. Such as sex, tribe, age, educational level, and all the others that I want to use. So this one will help me to understand what the work's about and what I need to do. I can also put covariates for potential confounding effects or anything like that, something that I will include in the analysis to control the effect of the outcomes and the predictors, or any derived variables that I'm going to use, such as latent variables that I'm going to use combining multiple variables. In this case, I'm not going to use this. And then we're going to dive into data management, which is data cleaning, data transformation, data storage, and workflow. So data cleaning is where we're going to explain what I'm going to do on identifying and handling missing or erroneous data. So if I'm working with age, for example, I notice that I don't have any missing variables, but I notice that I have a person that says they have 248 years of age. So 240 is a little too much for a person to live. So it's probably an error. What I'm going to do? I'm going to delete it. I'm going to try to contact the person again and see if there's what's the correct age, or I'm going to use the date of birth because I noticed that all dates of date of birth, it's correct. So I'm not going to use the age. I'm going to use the date of birth. So what I'm going to do? Yes, João.
Yes, Nathan, that is very important. Thank you for bringing this up. So I want you guys to think of this step in the analysis plan, so the data management there. This needs to be a mirror, a reflection of your codes when you're doing the analysis. So it's very, very common that we need to do all of these steps before we get the final result. So the table, the figure, the statistical analysis. But I want you to think and to go back to the analysis plan after you are done doing the analysis, because you're not going to know, oh, I have 10% missing for this data set, 20% for that other data set, before you actually get your hands in and do the work. But I want you to, after you're done or while you're doing it, come back to the analysis plan and add those information, even though it's boring, like, oh, age for the data set one, which Nathan is talking about merging or working with different data sets, is missing for 20 patients. Tribe is missing for 30 patients in one and 50 for the other. And it's fine, even if you want to have like separate tables and add those tables there to show the missing patterns for each data set. It needs to be very, very clear so we understand. I cannot tell you enough how many meetings I have had in which people are asking me, oh, but what did we do for the missing again? Can you check the pattern for this variable or that variable when the result should be done already? So this is very, very important. And thank you, Nathan, for highlighting that.
Yes, this is very important. And one thing that we need to start doing more frequently, and I say that by myself as something to myself, is a missing data report. So what I'm going to do for this data, specifically for this paper, is I'm going to explain the process of handling missing data, and I'm going to put here a link to the missing data report that I prepared. So I don't need to put the missing data report here because sometimes it's a huge report, but I can put a link to it. So if I want to check every single thing that I did for the report, I can just go there and check. And it's going to be here in Statistical Analysis as well. So I know what's going to be the process of handling this missing or erroneous data in the data set. And this goes for the same for data transformation. So one thing that is very useful when we're doing this data transformation and we want to people know what we did and why we did it, it's using a R Markdown coding file where it gives you the codes of what you did, and you can put this in this the transformation section, the link for that R Markdown, so people can see what transformations were applied, because sometimes we as analysts can do some minor, sometimes big errors in the coding and stuff. So people can see if there's anything that we need to assess in these data transformations, or if they want to transform in any other way. So for instance, race. Race is something that sometimes we need to combine into a binary or a 3-categorical variable, because we can have multiple answers. So I can have black non-Hispanic, black Hispanic, white non-Hispanic, white Hispanic, other non-Hispanic, other Hispanic, Asian, Pacific, well, I don't remember now the word, Native American, Alaskan, I don't know. So, and sometimes I have only 1 or 2 people in one of these categories that I want to, and of course, I'm not saying about the theoretical and the social construct of race here. It's just more like the idea of data transformation. So I'm going to combine this into a binary. How did I do it? Which variables did I use? This is important, because if I have multiple variables for the same question, so race, I have, or like the trauma, for trauma, I have, if it was a fracture, if it was a burn, if it was a puncture injury. So, and I have a question for each one of them, and I want to create a single one. I need to know which variables I'm using. So this is important to put here. I still had a lot of to go, as you may notice, but I cannot highlight how important this is. And I'm probably gonna bring this back in another section for more writing. So you're probably gonna see it how I've done it, like how I finished the drafts and went to discussion with the PIs and stuff. And how did it transfer for this first really early writing of the data analysis plan, statistical analysis plan. So for sake of time, I'm just end this here before I go to statistical methods and softwares and everything like that. And I'm probably gonna bring back this in another session, but I'm just gonna say thank you for hearing me say about this statistical thing for an hour now.
No, this was great, Nathan. I guess this plan of coming back with the draft filled in after a few meetings with the project is going to be great. And I would like to, if you could, like keep, tiny errors that we're going to come up with, the tiny edits that you're going to do, so we can show folks how it works and how this is supposed to be like a living document, keeping comments, etc. So just we can show how things are moving, and it's fine to have even like coming with a draft SAP is much better than having no SAP, because we're gonna do a work together to build it. So it's to show everyone that having the initial kickoff is better than worrying about having the perfect thing, because it's not gonna be perfect ever. We're gonna keep making edits and making it better and better.
Yes. Yeah, a statistical analysis plan is a lifesaver. And I cannot highlight this much as I wish, because it is something that can and will lead to a better report, a better analysis, and a really good evidence-based paper. because that's what research is for. We want to create a strong evidence of what we're researching. And if we cannot have this statistical plan very clear, not only on our minds, because in our minds, it probably can be clear, but sometimes it won't. It needs to be clear to everyone else who's working on this project. So it needs to be something accessible and really, really, really clear and really, really well written. So it needs to be something that will allow anyone, if I'm doing it and João is going to replicate that, he will be able to replicate that just by reading this.
Yes. And
So it
even
needs
further,
to be accessible.
I would say that I guess like the next step in reproducibility and keep this moving would be if we get to a state that we can actually publish the SAP or register the study before we actually start doing it. This is very common for like, of course, clinical trials, for systematic reviews or meta-analysis, but you can do for every type of study. And this is gonna take our research to the next level to make it more reproducible and adhere to the like the gold standards of biomedical research. So this is the first step. But we always need to look into the future and see what we want to achieve. That's, I think.
You can think of statistical analysis plan as a protocol. And remind you can publish a lot of protocols in research, and it's always useful to publish protocols in research. Think of it as a protocol and what you wish people would understand in the protocol.
Well, and remember too, like to Joao's point earlier, it's not only for the reader and for people to reproduce in the future, but it's for your own team.
Yes.
So that when 1 year from now, when a new person joins the team, you can see, oh, how are we supposed to do that? What was the plan? What's the cutoff? Everything is outlined in the SAP or the protocol.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've also encountered situations where the statistical analysis plan has actually helped us to do some further work on the CRF. I mean, you want to think about how you are going to use this data. The first thing is, are you even collecting everything you have to collect? So you may have to go back to your case report form and make some edits. And also sometimes just from the statistical analysis plan and giving software like R and Python, you can already write code for your analysis and kind of automate everything. So yeah, the statistical analysis plan is really, really important.
Yes. Okay, so we're in the limits here. Sorry for pushing all the way to the end. I'm gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining and participating.